evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024 Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting to order. The first item of this evening is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we'd be looking for a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
Madam Chair, move to approve.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Isay to approve this evening's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. The next item is item 3.1, approval of the June 25th, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes. Is there any additions or corrections to that? Hearing none, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the June 25th, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Mueller
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Doblinger to approve the June 25th, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next item, in organizational business, we have item 4.1, External Auditor's Report on 2023 Annual Financial Report. May we have the staff report?
Should I just go ahead? All right. Good evening, commissioners. Is the slideshow available? Do you know? Yep. All right. Perfect. My name is Andy Herring from Redpath & Company, the CPA firm that performed the audit of the HRA's financial statements for 2023, and I'm here to present the results of the 2023 audit. So we are hired and we audit the financial statements of the HRA, the city, and the Port Authority all at the same time, and the financial statements are all combined into one document. So one set of reports is issued by us that covers all three organizations. So with that, we issue an opinion on the financial statements, a report on internal controls, a report on Minnesota legal compliance, a report on federal compliance, although for 2023, the major federal programs audited did not involve HRA dollars. And then finally, a communication letter to those charged with governance, or the Board of Commissioners. A quick overview of the results. An unmodified opinion or a clean opinion was issued, no internal control or legal compliance findings, and just standard communications with those charged with governance. So overall, you passed. Good news. Nothing major to report. Looking back at 2022, each year the city, along with the HRA's financial statements, they're submitted to the Government Finance Officers Association. And for the 52nd consecutive year, the city and the HRA and the Port, the financial statements were awarded a Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting. So very few, I think it might be just 5 other organizations in the United States have received the award for that many years. So it's something that you can definitely be proud of. So the opinion on the financial statements, what we do, we audit the financial statements, this large document here, and to determine that the financial statements and note disclosures are materially presented. So what that means is we are not auditing every single transaction. The goal of the audit is not to guarantee that everything is fairly stated down to the penny, but rather we are responsible for detecting any material misstatements or those that might be affect the decisions of the financial statement user. So we look for kind of 3 primary techniques. Occurrence is everything that has been included in this document. Does it occur to and pertain to the HRA? Conversely, is everything that was supposed to be included or completeness, and then also accuracy, cutoff, classifications, making sure amounts are recorded in the correct fund and in the correct year, correct account, those types of things. We use a variety of auditing techniques, such as tracing to invoice and source documentation or analytical procedures, certain data analysis, all to accomplish the objective. So again, the results, a clean or unmodified audit opinion. And just one more thing, taking a step back, there are some more global risks we think of and design our audit towards when we conduct it. 3 risks were identified during planning, and these do not pertain specifically to the HRA, but more to audits in general. The risk of management override of controls, say a person in authority bypassing the policies and procedures, so that's always a risk. The risk of inappropriate or unauthorized disbursements. And then the third one is fairly technical, but it relates to matching up grant dollars on the revenue side with grant expenditures, making sure those are both recorded kind of hand in hand. So we did not note any issues with those risks, but those are always something we're looking for as we conduct the audit. Next, similar to that, a report on internal controls. We gain an understanding of the HRA's internal controls or their policies and procedures. For example, we're looking for proper approval of our disbursements, approval of a bank reconciliation, ideal segregation of duties, meaning no one person has too much power or authority, that there's a proper system of checks and balances in place. And also on the back end, then a review of financial information to detect errors. The results, no internal control findings. The state auditor's office issues a rather lengthy guide that we complete as part of the audit to verify the HRA is complying with state statutes. There's 7 sections as part of this guide. So we're testing a variety of transactions and statutes to verify compliance with those state statutes as part of the audit. And the result, no legal compliance findings. The last report is a letter of standard communications required by the auditor to those charged with governance. A few of the highlights, there was one new accounting standard implemented for 2023, but it actually did not have an effect on the financial statements. There are a few accounting estimates in the financial statements, but nothing all that sensitive. I'm happy to report that there were no difficulties encountered while conducting the audit. The staff were well prepared for us at the start time, and we didn't encounter any disagreements or anything like that. And we did not detect any material misstatements when conducting the audit. Just a quick summary tab of the financial activity for 2023. You can see the revenues and expenditures there, and then a transfer from governmental funds to the enterprise funds. Then an overall change in fund balance of $2.5 million, bringing the total fund balance to $21 million. But most of that is restricted for housing or various programs of the HRA. And then lastly, just a few highlights. The Port Authority Development Fund was created with a $1.4 million contribution from the HRA during 2023. And as a result of selling the Days Inn property, $6.45 million of bonds were paid off, the 18C and the 20A bonds. And then in the property management fund, it's a little deceiving actually. This middle column there, the $1,287,000, shows an increase in fund balance or equity. Well, almost $1.4 million of loans were forgiven, so that's included in that revenue number. So that's a one-time bump. So that's important to note that it's not, normally a $1,287,000 increase every year. But with that, all in all, good results, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, we'd be looking for a motion to accept the Housing and Redevelopment Authority Annual Comprehensive Financial Report for calendar year 2023.
Move to accept.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten,
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Mua to accept the Housing and Redevelopment Authority Annual Comprehensive Financial Report for calendar year 2023. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much for your
Great.
time tonight.
You're welcome.
We'll now be moving on to new business. Item 5.1 is the request for extension of maturity date for loan agreements between the Housing and Redevelopment Authority and Bloomington Southview Limited Partnership and Metropolitan Council Local Housing Incentives Account Local Match related to substantial rehabilitation of Southview Estates. May we have the staff report?
Chair Huhim, Commissioners, apologies for that title. This is an item related to Southview Estates, which the developer of this property has come to the city to make some financial requests associated with their recent application to Minnesota Housing's consolidated RFP. Next slide, please. Oh, I have this. Cool. So, Southview Estates, this is a multifamily residential property within Bloomington. It was originally developed with low-income housing tax credits and assistance from the HRA in 2002. The project has been operating as affordable. It's 80% affordable, so that's 80% of its 47 units, so 37 of those units are affordable, and that's been at the 60% area median income rent level. In 2020, the project refinanced and the HRA subordinated its 2 loans, so those were still in place. But the 30-year affordability period that the low-income housing tax credit program requires will be ending in 2033, at which point this project would become at risk, as any other LIHTC project is, for losing its affordability. That could occur if, for example, the property manager decides to sell the project. It's bought by a market rate property manager who rehabs the project and increases to a market rate rent. So that's something that's occurred and is definitely a risk for these types of properties. The developer, as I mentioned, this is Sand Companies, and they've applied to Minnesota Housing to conduct a $3.4 million rehabilitation program at the property. And I should say, I believe I saw the developer walk in, so if at any point we want to ask some questions, I believe they're willing to take some questions from the board, so I just wanted to add that. But they've provided a lot of information to me that I used to put together the presentation and staff report. So as part of that rehabilitation project, we would see a full project take place over 12 months, starting in early 2025 if funding is awarded. The proposed scope is extensive and would be assessed on a unit-by-unit basis. So some of the needs that may arise for the interior of the units would be flooring, cabinetry, countertops, bathroom vanities, air conditioners, in-unit appliances, energy-saving improvements, and then the list continues. The rehab would take place once materials were secured on site, and there would be every intention of keeping the residents in place within their unit. But if the renovation project made bathroom or kitchens unavailable, then housing would be secured for those residents off-site until they could be moved back in. There would also be exterior rehabilitation, which could include drainage and grading, roofing, gutters, windows, exterior doors, lighting, parking lots, sidewalks, accessibility improvements to the community room, HVAC upgrades, including replacement of a system that's original to the building, and inspection of all of the smoke and CO detectors. So the exterior work would also occur simultaneously to the interior work. So extensive, and that's all encompassed within that $3.4 million project cost. So Sand Companies has come to the city of Bloomington and the HRA to make some financial assistance requests, which would bolster the competitiveness of their requests to Minnesota Housing. So they'll be within this consolidated RFP pool, which is a competitive pool. They'll be competing against other projects within the Twin Cities region for that funding. And if the HRA and the city of Bloomington are able to support this project, it will increase their competitiveness by demonstrating local support. If this project is successful in receiving funding, They have committed to expanding and deepening the affordability that the project currently offers. I'll speak more to that later, as well as setting aside some units for some specific vulnerable populations. And they would also commit to a 50-year affordability term starting in the period that the funding is awarded. So that could extend out to 2076, which would be a gain of 43 years from the current requirement. So let's get into what these financial requests are. There's two specific requests and then a more general request. So first we have an extension of the maturity dates for the two HRA deferred loans, which were originally signed with the property in September of 2002. One of those loans is for $165,000 with a 3% interest rate, and the other is a $150,000 loan with a 0% interest rate. The $150,000 loan was a Met Council grant that the city received through the Livable Communities Act Local Housing Incentives account back in 2002, which at that time required a dollar-for-dollar match that the HRA provided in the form of that $165,000 loan. So the request would be to extend the maturity date of both of those loans by 30 years. And we'll talk more about that in detail. The other request is to agree to match dollar for dollar a Metropolitan Council Livable Communities Act Local Housing Incentives Account Program award. And so that's the same award that this project got back in 2002. They've applied again for that award through the RFP. And that award could be somewhere between $100,000 and $500,000. So what we would be agreeing to at this point, in terms of both of these requests, is to show support that the HRA and the city is willing to move forward with these financial assistance options. This would be communicated to Minnesota Housing. But just to be clear, staff would come back, if the funding is awarded, staff would come back to do the same type of loan negotiation and presentation of a loan amendment that would be done typically. So these items would be returning. Same with the dollar-for-dollar match. We would still need to allocate, or we would need to identify and allocate funding that would provide this match and in what form. So it could be the same that we did previously, which is an interest-bearing loan. It could come in the form of a grant or something else. And then finally, I mentioned a more open-ended request. The developer has informed us that depending on how the funding round goes, if Minnesota Housing doesn't meet their full request, there may still be a gap that they would come back to the city or HRA to ask for assistance in closing. So that's just keeping the door open if additional subsidy is needed. But again, that's just a broad request. So to get into more detail on the loan maturity date extensions, we've got this little timeline here. There's actually two proposed options for what that date could be extended to. So just moving across this timeline, the loans were initially executed in 2002. I've put the date specifically of the interest-bearing loan, which was September 12th. Today we're meeting to consider these requests, and as mentioned before, the affordability of the project as well as these loans comes up due in October 31st of 2033. So that's where the loan is currently standing to call for repayment. The first option for an extension would be 30 years, a 30-year loan extension from 2024. So that would be the end of this year, pending the project receiving funding from Minnesota Housing. That loan extension date would be December 31st of 2054. The second option would be a 30-year loan extension from the date that the loans are currently set to expire. So that's that 2033. We would be extending 30 years from that date out to October 31st of 2063. And then you can see the proposed affordability extension that this project would commit to if they get funding is out to October 31st of 2074. So I wanted to show specifically for the loan that is interest-bearing what the HRA would be committing to essentially in terms of allowing accrual with interest. So at this point, as of December 31st of last year, we had accrued $144,000 approximately of interest on top of the $165,000 loan. The loan is currently, at its current maturity date, that interest will have accrued up to $249,000. So when the loan comes to its maturity date, that full amount would be called for repayment, the 165 plus the 249. The first maturity date extension option for 2054 would allow interest to accrue up to $609,000. And then you can see if we allow for that later date of 2063, you'd be looking at $840,000 of interest. And so since this is a deferred payment loan, there haven't been monthly payments for this, so that's why this interest is accruing, and it's compounding on that balance. So that's why you're getting an accelerated accrual of interest as well. I wanted to speak specifically to basically what the residents of Bloomington are getting out of this rehab project and out of support from the city of Bloomington. So on the left table, you'll see the current affordability. That's, as I mentioned, the 37 units affordable at 60% AMI, and there's also 10 market rate units in the building. The proposed affordability would be 13 units at the 30% AMI level, so that's that deepest level of affordability that we talk about frequently as a great need in Bloomington and the region. There would also be 21 units 21 units at the 50% AMI rent level, which would allow households earning up to 60% of the area median income to rent. After 10 years, those rents would also ramp up to the 60% AMI level. So there's 13 units that would start at that level, the 60% AMI unit rent level for households earning 60% AMI. And there would be no market rate units. So earlier I mentioned that there would be increased access for certain vulnerable communities. Those are within that first column of the second table, set-asides. So 4 units would be set aside for high priority homeless. And these are designations that the Minnesota Housing sets. So high priority homeless are households that are prioritized for permanent supportive housing through the coordinated entry system. So Bloomington works with the Hennepin County coordinated entry system to get housing for people that are within that system. So these units would be set aside for households coming from that system. And then there would also be 6 set-asides for people with disabilities, which is a program serving low-income people with disabilities who are not homeless and who receive or are eligible to receive mainstream services. So that would be like financial subsidy, rent subsidy through the county. So that's 10 of those 30% AMI units. Then the final 3 would be open for rental, no set-asides for those 3 units. So one thing I wanted to talk about in this presentation is what can the city and the HRA do to be more proactive in assuring that our affordable properties within the city are able to maintain their affordability. In this case, the developer was able to reach out to the city to try and partner to improve their affordability, but that's more of a reactive position that the city is in that case. So what are some proactive steps that we can take? One is working with Minnesota Housing to conduct an annual review of the low-income housing tax credit owner's certification of compliance. These are reports that property managers submit every year to Minnesota Housing. We're able to do a data request to review those reports and identify if any properties are having compliance issues, in which case the city could reach out to offer support and figure out what needs assistance to get back into compliance. We could also ramp up outreach through those reports. We could identify which projects are reaching the end of their use period for affordability and try and be intentional in partnering with those properties on looking for affordability preservation measures, such as what we're doing now with Southview Estates. Some other programmatic choices that could be made through HRA, potentially through the HRA, would be establishing a multifamily residential rehab loan program. It could be allocating additional funding for NOAA preservation through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. There could be property manager outreach for NOAA properties, which I should distinguish as separate from the property that we're considering today. This property is a naturally occurring affordable housing property because it received subsidy in its initial development. So it has affordability restrictions in place. That means it's not a NOAA property. So there's kind of two categories of properties that have affordability, and we can be proactive in ensuring the preservation of affordability for both types. Another option would be collaborating internally in community development with our environmental health division. They work with these properties, of course, for our rental licensing program. They're able to identify if these properties are having quality issues that might need some rehab funding. So we can work internally to collaborate on outreach in that case. And then finally, I just wanted to mention we are at this point participating in some regional work groups. We're not the only community experiencing this problem. There are subsidized projects all across the region that are reaching the end of that affordability period. And this is it's not a new problem, but it's a problem that's going to grow as there's more projects that are coming to term now than ever, basically. So partnering with our regional collaborators to figure out what these solutions can be. So finally, there are some staff requests that we would like some HRA board direction. And this is in addition to the base of what you're considering, which is to support or not support these financial assistance requests from the developer. But more specifically, I mentioned there are two options for the extension of maturity dates. So staff is looking for direction on which of these to support. The 2054, which would be a 30-year extension from the project receiving financing from Minnesota Housing, which could be this year or next year, or a future year if they don't receive the funding immediately. Or it could be 2063, which would be 30 years from the current maturity date. Or you could choose to not support that extension. And then the other question is, should the Bloomington HRA communicate to Minnesota Housing and the Met Council that its ability to meet that local match requirement can only go up to a certain level? So I told you it's anywhere between 100,000 to 500,000. That's a pretty broad range. Would the HRA want to basically say we can only go up to a certain amount? What amount would that be? Is the HRA willing to support any amount? And at this point, we could also start discussing specific funds that we would want to allocate for that match. So that is the presentation. And I'm open to questions. And I think the developer is here and willing to take questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Commissioner Wooten.
So I wanted to go on record that I asked staff a couple of questions before the meeting. And the two questions I asked was, are we approving this loan with no other obligation for money to the project from HRA? And the second question I asked was, in response to the $72,000 for rehab per unit, what that entailed. I know you went over some of that, so I wanted to read that in the record because I'd like to have the answer on record.
Chair Huliam, Commissioner Wooten, thank you. Yeah, so to the first question, the two requests before the HRA are related to the extension of maturity dates and the commitment to a local match. There wouldn't be a commitment to any further financial subsidy, but as I did mention, the developer has asked that the HRA or has notified us that there may be a financial gap that they would come back to ask for additional subsidy to. But for the purposes of the developer's application to Minnesota Housing and these requests, we would not be committing to any additional subsidy. And then to the second question of it was what is entailed by the rehab project.
Right, and I'm actually looking at the amount seemed to be pretty exorbitant, so I'm looking at that amount, the quality of the work, the extension of the investment. Is it for the life of the loan over the next 30 years or the next 50 years? You know, what does that really mean?
Thank you.
Good evening. Megan Carr. I work with Sand Companies, and we represent the owner here. So as part of the rehab and going back to Minnesota Housing, we had to hire a third-party consultant who came in and looked at 20 years. So anything that that the life of the item would be at its life expectancy within the next 20 years should be looked at to be replaced. So we went through it top to bottom on the building. It's, kind of a little bit of a guessing game, because to get through every unit would be very onerous on the tenants, and also trying to figure out, 15 countertops. So we went through several units, several areas of the building to say, okay, it looks like we're going to have to replace, maybe 25 to 50% of the refrigerators over the next 10 years. It's likely based on appliance useful life, for example, that's not going to be 20 years. So we anticipated that we'll replace 100% of the appliances. Now that'll be on an as-needed basis when we go through each unit. Other areas that we looked at, some of the bathroom vanities were really needed to be replaced in this, so we planned for 100% of those. The windows are original to the building, so we plan to replace all of the windows. Some of the drainage around the building has some water coming into the garage, which is not that big of a deal right now, but we want to fix that and make that, correct that drainage flowing the right way. I'm trying to think some of the other areas that we looked at. Flooring was another big one going into the units. It was originally designed, and many apartments at this time were designed this way, that when you walk in, there was a small area for a landing zone that had hard flooring, and then it was carpet right away into the eating area and whatnot. So our standard practice now is to do hard flooring throughout that space. So many of those carpets are needing to, would be replaced with hard flooring during this process. Toilets, for example, are at 1.6 gallons per flush, and so we would like to replace those with 1.28. Those are just some ideas to give you an idea. So, but the third-party consultant is the one who came up with that dollar figure to be able to do those.
So for clarification, we're not talking about total rehab of each unit. We're talking about specific things in each unit. So again, I'm wondering the $72,000 per unit. If each unit is not being totally replaced, then where's that amount coming from?
Yep, so that would all be, so first of all, it would all be through an audit. So Minnesota Housing requires an audit at the end of the project. So we would go through and we would say, okay, unit 101, I don't even know if that's a unit number in this building, but unit 101, we are going to replace all the countertops, we're going to replace, the cabinets, and maybe some of those cabinets will get reused for unit 102. The flooring will get replaced, the toilets, we would go through each of those items. And so if there was some, let's say there was cost savings or cost overrun, we would look to see, first of all, if there's cost overruns, where we could minimize those cost overruns. If there were cost savings, we would look to work with HRA and Minnesota Housing to say, okay, how do we balance that out? So we don't anticipate, we've done quite a few renovation projects, and we've worked with our third-party consultants to figure out the best way to, kind of get at a very good number initially. But that project would go to bid. It would be competitively bid after we're awarded the funding from Minnesota Housing.
And you're looking at you're looking at a life expectancy of 20 years?
That's what is on the current analysis that Minnesota Housing requires. We have to look at what is expiring its useful life in the next 20 years that may need to be replaced during that time period. That couldn't maybe be replaced through operations.
So in the event that you don't use all of those dollars, where is the rest of the money going to?
That would follow the workbook that was submitted to Minnesota Housing, and they, as a funder, and the HRA as a funder, we'd have conversations with that, whether that would be paying down loans or reducing the amount of tax credits on the project that they would receive, things like that. So anytime we go through the analysis of Minnesota Housing, all of the costs are audited. And so what I'm trying to say is it's not just we can either use it in the project, or we could upgrade and maybe add solar to the roof if that's what the funders, if we had a conversation with them to say, hey, is that something that we could use the money for? Or it might be, hey, you know what, we want you to reduce the tax credits, or we want you to pay down the deferred loans.
Can I ask one last question? So do you have a model in mind of where you've done that in the past and it's been successful, or?
Yeah, we actually have done, recently we have done a renovation we've done 3 buildings in St. Cloud area. So they were done, we actually acquired the properties from a nonprofit that went defunct. We worked with Minnesota Housing to help keep those affordable, and we renovated, one of them was a 10-unit single-family home development where we renovated the entire interior and exterior, And then the other two buildings were townhome communities. One was 32 units and one was 24 units. And those were, all of those had residents in place that we were able to work with them to renovate their buildings.
And so one last question, I promise.
It's okay.
That's a outstate example.
Yep.
Metro area demographics and market rates and market conditions are different. Do you have anything here?
I don't have recent renovation that we've done in place, but I have built projects in Plymouth, Roseville, Dayton. I have a building under construction in Crystal, Minnesota. We just opened a building in the last couple of years in Shakopee. Those are the ones off the top of my head. Those are just within the last 3 years that we've built. So we're very familiar. We have over 45, I think now, low-income housing tax credit buildings throughout the entire state of Minnesota and Iowa. So and most of our buildings are in the metro. We just haven't done a renovation this large in the metro area. So we do understand the challenges that may bring, but we do have experience with the renovation piece.
Okay. I do have one question, and that is, since you're up here, do you have a plan in place for going forward in the future of budgeting for these kind of renovations so that it doesn't necessarily have to come back to the cities and the HRA and we don't have to maybe have this discussion in 30 years? I'm a very blunt and forward person. I just want to know if you have a plan in place for these types of things in the future. Since you're talking about 20 years, you have to look in 20 years now, these refrigerators, these things are all going to be needing replacement again. What is your plan for funding on that?
Yep. So I think I haven't been through all of the units, but I think many of the units there's been, appliances that have been replaced. There's replacement reserves that are in place and whatnot. And so at some point, the expenses on the tax credit buildings, they, age out or get close to aging out. And so you have a couple of choices. They can convert to market, or you can try to refinance them like we're doing right now. And it's usually related to significant improvements that are larger than the replacement reserves. So windows, siding. This building has steel siding, so we're not planning to replace that. But some buildings that you may see in this era may have vinyl siding. And unfortunately, hailstorms are great when they happen, but they don't always work out. And so in this building, roof is something that it is at its useful life. And so that's a significant expense that outweighs the replacement reserves that may be available. So that's why we're here asking for the extension request. We did submit to Minnesota Housing the application on July 11th. We were hoping that we could get before the HRA board prior to that application, but we still would like to be able to show that the city of Bloomington is supporting the project. I will be really honest that most projects that are renovation don't get funded by Minnesota Housing in the first year, so it might take maybe another year. We're hopeful that that's not the case, but want to just be really honest with where we're at in the project. We would like to keep the project affordable. The owners, like I said, I just represent the owners, but the owners would prefer to keep this as an affordable building and extend it. The current application or competitive application round is for 50 years is what most are electing, and so that's what the owners would like to pursue.
Commissioner Moa.
Thank you, Chair. So is the primary reason why you're coming forward now is because of need for renovations? Because the loans still go for another 10 years, so renovations is kind of what's driving the need right now?
Yeah, yep, renovations, and then also just because it does take a couple of years to get going. So even if this project were to get funded, hopefully in December, we would hopefully start construction sometime in 2025. That would be another 12 months approximately to get that completed. And that's assuming that we don't have any significant funding that requires environmental reviews that need to be complete through a Part 58 or HUD review, because that can add 6+ months to the process. And so so we'd be looking at, this project wouldn't be replaced in service until, sometime in 2026.
Sure.
So we're trying to look ahead and look at our projects and where they're at.
And then what's the plan? For some reason, Minnesota Housing does not grant funding, even with the next couple of years. What's the plan for that if we don't get funding?
Yep. So we would continue to have conversations with the owners and Minnesota Housing. We would go in. We already had several meetings with them back in January, February to talk about the project. After the awards are announced, if it is selected, we would have a meeting to talk about what the process would be for moving forward with that. And if it's not selected, we would have a recap meeting to talk about what ways we could improve the application or what their other ideas are, if they have other funding that may be available to aid in some of the renovations.
Commissioner Wooten?
Two other questions. One is a loan transferable if ownership changes in the project?
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner Wooten. Typically, the way our loan agreements are structured is that it is transferable with the owners.
Okay. And then the second question I have is, in the case of businesses going out of business, is a loan callable sooner?
Chair Commissioners, so there's a list of events of default or early call.
Sorry.
And my understanding is, so your question was if the business falls apart. So like if there was a lapse in management, if the building was basically became unmanaged or in disrepair, there's a specific event of default related to non-maintenance of the building, and that would be an event of default.
Commissioner Mua?
All right, I have more questions for staff. I guess one of the things that I know council is focused on is making sure that properties developed throughout the city have a mix of affordability and market rate, to share and spread out so that we're not concentrating it in one particular area. So moving to this plan moves up to fully affordable. I guess how do you balance that vision of what council's trying to do versus going full affordable with this unit?
Chair and Commissioners, it's a difficult situation because the nature of Minnesota Housing's RFP is that the deeper the affordability and the broader the affordability, the more competitive the application. So in this case, the developer is showing those 30% units as well as the set-asides. When this project originally got tax credits, it qualified under the 40 at 60 rule. Is that accurate? So that's only 40% of the units affordable at 60% AMI. That was the type of project that could get funding from a public source in 2002. There's no way that would get funding in 2024. So that's why, in terms of this application, you're seeing that deeper affordability. I think there is a lot to say about our new multifamily developments that can look to do income averaging. That's an option where you can see some of those above 60% AMI rents to have more of a mixed income building. I think in this case, because this is an existing affordable project, they've been operating it at 80% of units at an affordable level. It just really wouldn't make for a competitive application to Minnesota Housing. So it's a difficult situation to achieve on that goal. But I think you're seeing we're achieving on that deeper affordability goal, which is really crucial. I mean, 13 units, if I'm just off the top of my head, I think that's how many we have since 2020 in new builds. So this would be doubling it. So
One more question. And then the slide with the principal and interest growth and the fact that there's no current payments on it, it grows pretty exponentially. And so there's concern that we get to that point and the ability to repay the loan once it's been accrued at this level. I think it's been confirmed that the loan stays with the property and not with the owner. And so if there was a forced sale, the HRA and the city would still recoup our financing. Is that correct?
Chair and Commissioners, that's right. If there was a sale, unless the city agreed to subordinate the loan to a new primary mortgage, I believe, or agree to transfer the loan to a new owner, which we're allowed to do, but we would have to agree to do that. If we didn't agree, then the balance of the loan would be called for repayment.
Okay.
Commissioner Isay?
Yeah, I think this is more so a comment as opposed to a question, but I would just be curious if it's possible to have kind of like some kind of itemized list of where this funding would go towards. I know you guys are mentioning that it's kind of difficult to know exactly and go into every single unit. I agree, it's definitely burdensome to kind of do that, but even something where it's like a more specific list where we know where it's going towards, just so that we can kind of, you know, understand like where priority lies and stuff like that. Because I know you're mentioning if there was an excess amount of funds, maybe it could go towards something else, but it's like, if there's, how do we determine what's important and what's not? And so I think if we're going to allocate these funds, which is quite a lot, 100,000 to 500,000, a big range as well, to just at least kind of have some kind of ballpark list or some kind of document where we can see where it's going towards. Yeah.
Is it okay if I? Sorry, thank you. Yes, we would. So right now at application phase is just basically getting the application together, making our best estimate. Once, if the project is selected, then we would go, there would be an architect that would go through every unit, itemize everything, and we can definitely work with staff who can update you, or we can come back and walk through high level more so, or if you want more detail, we're happy to provide that. But we would, prior to starting any renovation and finalizing the budget that Minnesota Housing would approve, we would go through every single unit and create a very detailed list and a timeline of how we're going to get that done with the resident in place. That's the goal. You know, hopefully our goal is to have everything secured on site before we start a unit. So when we go in and we take a kitchen out or take toilets and bathroom vanities and flooring out, we can get that all done in that day. So they may be without one bathroom for the day, but they have a second bathroom, or we have another area that they can use, but then that night, it's all put back in place for them. That's our goal. Now, if that doesn't happen, we would relocate them temporarily for a night, hopefully not longer than that. So yes, that would be our goal. And Minnesota Housing also, because they're the primary funder of the project, or that's our request to them, they would also have an on-staff architect who would oversee the entire renovation and walk the building at least once a month with us and walk through those changes. So, yeah.
Commissioner Mueller.
I don't know if someone can explain to me, like I'm a 5-year-old, which is the latest statement of why is this not being paid and the interest is accruing? I don't understand.
Do you want me to?
I mean, almost $1 million in
Yeah.
interest by
It was,
26.
yeah. So on the tax credit projects, oftentimes there'll be a request to the city for some financial assistance, not just the city of Bloomington, but many cities throughout the metro. And one way to show local support is a deferred interest loan. So the loan continues to increase on the deferred interest because there's no required principal payments on that loan. And that's been utilized in many cities throughout the area, and that's what was utilized when this project was first funded in 2002. So the loan is set up as a deferred loan, no required repayment on a monthly basis. So it's only if the building were to sell or something, then or the city decided not to subordinate to the mortgage, the owner would have to repay that loan and the full interest earned.
Chair Commissioners, I just wanted to add, in recent years with the usage of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that's not how loans have been structured. So we do have interest-bearing loans that get principal and interest repayment. That's been since 2020 or 2019, the fund was established, and we've been using that. So it may just be the fact that the city has changed how it wants to distribute that type of funding since 2002. And but I think it's helpful to have the context of how cities have supported these projects, and perhaps Bloomington has an option to change or to continue path.
That's what I was wondering, is there, if this is not how it's done anymore, can we change it so this interest is not accruing?
Chair and Commissioners, that could certainly be part of, if the project receives its funding and staff come back with a drafted loan amendment document, that could be the type of term that would be negotiated. So that can certainly be an option.
Can you go to the last slide, please? Thank you. I apologize. Thank you. So kind of rounding back out with, since I don't see any other questions, these are the questions kind of before us to direct our discussion. So I would like to put it to the board of starting with question 1, which maturity date extension option is preferred, or is there no extension of maturity date? Can I get some feedback on that, please? Commissioner Mueller.
For me, it would depend on the financing. If you were able to go to the new way things are financed or not, I would need more information on that before I could say what option was preferred.
Chair and Commissioners, and we could, part of what we're doing tonight isn't like a formal resolution. It's more of just granting staff the ability to communicate to Minnesota Housing for how the HRA can be expected to support this project. So if you wanted to just kind of verbally, if we wanted to lay out how staff should communicate, we could add that part of the loan extension would be a renegotiation of terms and what you've been saying, I believe, is to remove the interest accrual requirement of the loan, or whatever it is that we wanted to achieve. So that's something we could do tonight as well.
Minimize it.
And there are different ways that could be accomplished.
Is there other feedback regarding?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I
Commissioner Isay.
second that definitely.
Yeah.
I think 800,000 is a lot, but I mean, just looking at it off the bat, I mean, I'm thinking 2054 just because so much can change. But again, I also agree that it depends on how it would be renegotiated. So yeah, more information for sure.
So I guess maybe when looking at kind of the staff recommendations, I want to kind of make sure we're staying in the right wheelhouse here. That right now what staff is ultimately looking for is and I just want to help our conversation, is to support, if we are willing to support, say, their application to the Minnesota Housing Consolidated Request proposal, basically saying that as a board, do we support that so they can move forward? Because as stated, from my understanding, it will look better to their application if they have the HRA support behind it. And the other is a separate support of that $100,000 to $500,000 match. I just want to clarify so we're kind of all understanding, because it's a lot of information right now. There's a lot being discussed. So I just want to kind of make sure that we're understanding these are the two discussions that we're having, and that's where these kind of come in. But I don't think these are the end-all be-alls of the evening. But it is to direct staff and say, are we willing to support it? If so, how would we like staff to do that? And if not, that's where we're at. Am I correct in stating that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to reiterate that is correct. And I just also want to repeat again that if they were awarded through Minnesota Housing, this would come back in front of the board for final approval at that time. So there would be another opportunity for the board to discuss this as well.
Commissioner Wooten?
So if it's stated exactly like that, then I probably have no problem. But if you put these dates in there, then I have an issue. And it's not an issue so much as I'm more inclined to say, those dates, given everything else we're asking, I can't make a formative decision based on fact or based on enough information. So I'm not comfortable committing. But if it's just those flat statements and no dates, and it gets to come back before the HRA, then I would be moved to approve. And I know that's not making.
I know
me
that
happy,
they
but
need.
that's where I am.
I will say this when reading our. Okay, I will go ahead and defer.
No, I didn't want to interrupt. I was just going to say. What I would maybe suggest is if the answer is that you would like to see potentially a non-deferred loan, that there would be payments, monthly, maybe interest payments or something like that, and that you would be willing to extend up to 30 years from the date. I think that would be something that maybe you could state, Currently, in what we submitted to Minnesota Housing, we didn't include payments. So if that is something that you feel very strongly about, we would like to know now so we can notify Minnesota Housing if the project is selected, they can underwrite it as though there will be interest payments. So if that is something that you would like to include in the letter, I would like that as well. And if that's not something that's important, that's okay. And then if you're willing to go up to the 30 years from the current date or something like that, to say like potentially up to that amount. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, if it's 20 years or whatever that might be, but even that is helpful. So when Minnesota Housing underwrites, they can understand what the implications are. Because when it's been submitted now, and so now Kenny will communicate with them what the recommendation is, and they will underwrite it based on that, which may be different than what we submitted. And that's okay, because if the project gets selected, what we want to do is have it be a project that can move forward.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? Since you are with the owners, are the owners comfortable with that interest, the lump interest at the end? I just want to know where they're sitting financially in that position.
Yeah, my guess is if it were to go out to 2063, I mean, the way that that loan would be paid off would be a sale of the project likely, or, some other way. We could have structured this that the HRA loans would have been fully paid off, which basically would have been just asking for more money from Minnesota Housing. But the local participation support is really important for these projects. And so that's how we structured our submission to Minnesota Housing. But, and hopeful that the city of Bloomington and the HRA would be supportive of that. And especially given, we had a lot of conversations with Anna and Kenny about what does that look like from an affordability perspective, like for this extension, what is the city getting? And I understand the point to the market rate. Besides income averaging, I mean, right now, like Kenny said, the way the RFP through Minnesota Housing is set up, it's very difficult to do market rate mixed in. And oftentimes, to be honest, the market rate are not true market rate units. They're more at maybe a 60 or 70%, just because there's not as many services as you might see in a traditional market rate high-rise building. So.
Commissioner Moa.
Thank you, Chair. I think overall, I do want to support the developer. Even at 60% AMI, that's the starting salary for one of our new police officers here in town. So when we're talking about affordability, we're not talking about, vastly different incomes. Like that's our firefighters, our police officers, our first responders who can't live in Bloomington. And so I do support the fact that we are continuing to support these developers who want to continue to support the housing in Bloomington and make sure that a wide range of people can live and work in Bloomington. I am interested in understanding or shifting to what we currently do with the OHO and how we're repaying those loans back. I think not only does that prevent burden in the future where a developer has to sell, but provides us other avenues of opportunities that when we get to that date of 2063, which would be my preference as long as we can, we have options to further that instead of forcing a sale and then pushing everything into market rate. So that's my thought on it. And I would like to see more of the details that we've talked after that, after we've provided a recommendation.
Further discussion? I agree with Commissioner Mua on the idea of extending it to the 6 to 63 for sure. And with the trying to maybe talk about the terms, renegotiating the terms. I also want to state that I commend the city too for the proactive measures that we're taking now going forward. Like, I think this starts a discussion of what we can do in the future to prevent it from getting to where we are today, where we can intervene sooner. So it's not this, we're kind of unsure of where we're really sitting. Let's be honest about that. But I agree with the 2063 myself, with in negotiating the terms. I'd like to open that for more discussion, or if anybody would like to agree with that portion of the support.
Chair, who am I?
Any guidance would be
Well,
appreciated.
yeah.
This is kind of some uncharted.
I do want to add that to what Megan said regarding to the Minnesota Housing's underwriting. It's important for us to select a date because that informs underwriting. It's also important for us to message what these negotiated terms that we're discussing would be for underwriting purposes. So if we wanted to commit to I think we need to talk through that is what I'm saying. If we're going to renegotiate terms related to the interest repayment, if this is going to become a loan that requires a monthly payment, then the developer will need to know that for purposes of their application. So, but I don't know if there's enough time tonight to get through term negotiation in a live
Can I ask
meeting.
one question? What is, and I don't know if you can answer this, but what does that do to their chances of approval? I mean, does that change their chances of approval?
What it would do in the current application is it would just have additional requests from Minnesota Housing because it would be debt service versus deferred, which, like I said, we'd rather have the answer now than a year from now when we come in and we're like, yep, the project's all ready to go. We just need you guys to approve this loan agreement extension, and then the debt service is upside down because of it. I just want to be very clear that our request is only if we get selected in the RFP. We are not interested in renegotiating terms right now unless we are selected. So I just want to make sure that that's in this communication. But I think if the answer is that you would like to have debt service on this, whether it's interest or principal interest, we would like that included in the letter. And I think that we're open to all of that. It's just that the financial projections just need to reflect that. And after Kenny or the city communicates with Minnesota Housing, we would also message them to let them know, like, hey, this needs to be updated if it moves forward.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to add one more comment. If the terms can be renegotiated, then I would definitely be comfortable supporting 2063.
Thank you.
Chair Huhim and commissioners, it sounds like there's some support for that later date of 2063, as long as part of the communication to Minnesota Housing is that, and this is my understanding, is that there would be a debt service added to the loan. So that would mean a monthly repayment of interest or principal and interest. It sounds like, based off of what Megan said, that that type of communication should be sufficient for their underwriting purposes at this point. And staff, of course, would come back to the HRA to actually drill down onto what those details would be if the project is awarded funding. So it sounds like 2063 with a debt service.
Commissioner Doblinger.
I just wanted to add, looking at the location of the building, it's pretty good. It's on Lindale. It's the main drag. There's a lot of stuff around it that's walkable. Grocery store, pet stores, fast food if you're into that. I think it's good to keep it in good shape and, keep people living there, because having Lindale be walkable would be really good. Mm-hmm.
I definitely support that statement, and it's very affordable, and it is our goals, and it's in our mission. It's what the HRA stands for, correct? And to get that deeper affordability is really important. I will say, being specific with people with disabilities is important, especially when you talk about like the location, all of that. So I do think this is a project that I feel we need to support 100% and keep it affordable and keep it in Bloomington and not allow it to go to market, right? So I think with that, and it's kind of seeming pretty, I guess, the recommendation, if I'm understanding, would be at this point saying that we would we support the application with the extension of the 2063. I'm trying to just wing this.
Chair,
Thank you.
Yeah, so it would be supporting, based on what I'm hearing, supporting an extension to 2063 with the understanding that there would be a renegotiation of the loan terms with the potential to add a debt service.
Is that okay? Can we get a motion to support what Administrator
Move.
Softener said?
I move to accept.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten and a second by Commissioner Doblinger. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. And I apologize that I didn't restate it, but it is on record. So.
Thank you, Chair. I just also want to recognize that there is still the local match discussion that
Yes.
okay.
Yep, that was what I was going to move on to next, is the second part of the support, or recommendation for support, would be that match that could come back if they are awarded between the 100 and the 500,000. And it looks like staff is really kind of looking to us to guide them on, are we willing to do that? What kind of specific funds? Is there any amount? Is there a max amount that we're kind of at? I will say this, I do have one question, and this might be out of the box, and this may be complete, and it's just, I wasn't around when this project took place, and I don't know how things can happen. But part of it is, I look at, we have like $100,000 loan and a $165,000 loan. So I look at those funds and I say, what if we just got rid of that and use that as, could we still use that as part of the match? Is my question.
Chair and Commissioners, so this was something that we discussed a little bit, and I think the reality is that we aren't sure yet. Yeah. It's up to Minnesota Housing to determine if, or Metropolitan Council in this case, to determine if loan forgiveness would qualify as a local match. They might also determine that the extension is considered a local match.
Yep. So the funds, the livable communities, I can't remember the full name of it, but the LCDA funds, very few projects actually get that funding. But this project would be ineligible for that funding if without this form, which this form that the city staff will sign relates to that there's a match. So I think on the form it states what is the source of the match. So I think it would be reasonable, and Kenny can disagree with me, to state that the city would be willing to match via extension. And that would be the extent of these specific funds, if that's what you chose to do, or loan forgiveness if the developer chose to do that. I will tell you, as a for-profit entity, a loan forgiveness would be taxable. So that's not preferred. But a loan, you could say we are willing to match via loan extension only. And so therefore, if they don't count those funds, the hope would be that they don't award this project that money. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. I do appreciate that. It was just outside the box thinking. Commissioner Mua.
Thank you, Chair. There was conversation about potentially a developer might have to come back for additional funding. I guess what's the overall requirement and ask?
We have no idea. We just didn't want to come back and say, hey, or come here now and say, hey, this is all that we need, and then all of a sudden in 6 months come back and say, well, actually, just kidding, we do need additional funding. So we just want it noted that we may come back. We'll have before that were to happen, we would have a lot of discussions with staff and discussions on where the city is at financially, or just the ability to support the project. And so the staff answer before we even get to you might say, well, you can come back, but it's probably not going to be supported. Or the other option too, a lot of our projects in Hennepin County, we work through Hennepin County Home Funds, AHIF funds, and through their RFP. So that might be another option if there were a gap to remain that we would pursue and likely pursue that first. But we just didn't want to, in 6 months from now, you say, well, how come you didn't tell us that you might come back and ask for additional funds? So we have no intention to right now, but also just want to be very open and honest.
Thank you. And then for staff, do we have any preliminary funding identified within the budget?
Chair and Commissioners, there's some No, I mean, we have things that would potentially fit. However, we haven't allocated any of those funds, but we could look at our pooled TIF from our TIF districts across the city that have been accumulating pooling for affordable housing activities. We could look to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund if it were to have a new funding source that would closely map onto this project as it's within the goals of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Might be a new programming option for CDBG funds. It could be an option for the usage of the local Affordable Housing Aid LAHA funds that we've just started to receive this month. So there's definitely options, but at this point we haven't designated or allocated.
Thank you. I appreciate that we have plenty of, it sounds like we have plenty of opportunities or options possible. So I guess I would like to lead in the discussion of, are we willing to support a match subsidy? And if so, do we have a limit or a specific amount that we're looking for or looking towards as a board? And remember, it's between like 100,000 and 500,000. 500,000, it sounds like, would be the max. Am I correct on that, of the request of the match?
It's an interesting fund.
Okay.
Yes and no. They don't tell you how much a project might get. If you sign the form, then the anticipation would be that the city or county would match it dollar for dollar. We have recently, a few of our projects have received like a couple 100,000. So I don't think I've seen a project that we've done that's gotten over 500,000, but there could be something. I think if you wanted, the form doesn't specifically, that's the other thing, the form doesn't specifically state how much you're willing to contribute, so it's kind of odd funding, but I think you could put that in the source of funds that the city would be willing to match up to whatever dollar amount that might be.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I just also want to add, as Megan mentioned earlier, the potential match could also be the loan extension. That could be another way of framing what that local match would look like. So I just want to make sure that that is up for discussion as well.
Commissioner Mua.
Thank you, Chair. So would it make sense if we did the loan extension at 265,000 and then a contribution to get up to the 500, so that we're not contributing a full new 500,000?
Chair and Commissioners, just to clarify that there's a 150,000 and a 160,000, so we're at 310. That's the total loan balance. But yeah, I think that's definitely a starting point, or could be your ending point as well.
Commissioner Doblinger.
I just want to say that I like spending money on this project because it's in a good location, and I like to keep Bloomington nice. Making it nice is better.
Commissioner Mueller.
I just have to say that I agree with Commissioner Mua about getting it up to 500 and dividing it between the loan and the, however you worded that so eloquently. I would be in favor of that.
Chair and Commissioners, I do also want to just add to what Kenny just mentioned too, is that 310 amount doesn't include the interest that's already accrued on those loans. So that is another thing that we would want to keep in mind in this discussion. And the accrual is only happening on one of the loans. It's not happening on both of them. So that's why that's only showing the 165.
Commissioner Mua.
Thank you, Chair. So I would be supportive of extending the current loan and the interest on that, and then the new money would be just whatever to cover that 500.
That's what I was going to suggest. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a recommendation. Is there any more discussion on that for now on that recommendation? Any other recommendations that would like to be brought to the floor? Okay, hearing none, it looks like we would be having a motion to support the Metropolitan Council Local Housing Incentive Account Program funds by recommending City Council approve authorizing the loan extension, including interest earned, and then matching the difference, correct?
I will just add, and it's
Thank you.
solely based on what any potential award could be. So it would just be a local match. So it could potentially be less than that total $500,000 that we would be asked to match. But it's, I think what staff is requesting tonight is just kind of feedback of what the scope or range that we would be willing to consider.
So that would be the recommendation to staff, correct? Yes, Commissioner Moa.
And I would add, our preference for buckets would be to use the loan extension first instead of new money.
Yep. Okay. So with that,
So thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I just want to kind of reiterate what the potential motion would be. It would be a motion to support Sand Company's application to the Metropolitan Council Local Housing Incentives account. And essentially what you would be recommending tonight is recommending City Council approve authorizing signature of that award acknowledgement. So that's what you would be motioning to approve. In addition to that, kind of with the discussion we've had tonight, acknowledging that the recommendation to staff as part of this motion is to stay within the loan extension as the local match first before adding additional local dollars.
So moved.
we have a motion by Commissioner Mua
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Mueller. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time tonight. Okay. Moving on to new business, item 5.2 is the public hearing contract for private development with West Hennepin Affordable Housing Trust for sale and redevelopment of 9030 Park Avenue South. We will start with the staff report. Just kind of give a format. We'll be starting with the staff report. We will then open it up for public comment, and then we will vote after that. Yes.
Yeah, we'll be
Have
looking
the
for a
staff
motion after
report,
that.
please.
Yes. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. We're here to discuss 9030 Park, legally known as Lot 4, Block 3, FAR 3rd Edition. This property was purchased by the HRA in late 2020, and a substandard structure was removed with the goal of creating affordable homeownership new construction. The redevelopment property has been going through the necessary steps to subdivide the lot in preparation for redevelopment, and Durley will speak about what that process has looked like up until this point.
Good evening, Chair and board members. So we had to submit 2 applications for this item. One was the lot split, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna make sense once you hear our partner's presentation. But one was the lot split, and then the second application was the vacation easement. So the first application for the lot split went to DRC. It's the Development Review Committee for the City of Bloomington. It is confirmed by several members of city departments and divisions. They gave comments about the item, and one of the biggest comments was that we needed to preserve a existing tree at the lot. So staff work on a preservation tree plant, and then once that was approved, then we went to the Planning Commission on May 16, and the Planning Commission approved the item, which went before the City Council on May 20th as a consent agenda item, and then it was approved. So for the vacation easement, we went to City Council last night, and it was actually approved by the City Council. We are expecting the closing date to be late August, and it all depends on the recording the milers with the county.
So in late 2023, development plan was brought to this body for consideration, and the board ultimately approved staff to move forward with the redevelopment project in partnership with West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust and Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. Representatives from those organizations are here tonight to kind of just give us a refresher presentation since it's been a while, and talk about the development plan and cost. And then after that, we can open the public hearing, and then we would be looking for a motion to approve the sale of the property and the contract for private development. So I will introduce Brenda Lionel-Wolke with West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust and Noah Keller with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity to come up.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners.
Good evening.
My name is Noah Keller. I'm with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. I am a land acquisition project manager, also a global engagement program manager. I can recruit people for international build trips after the meeting here. And I will allow Brenda to introduce herself as well.
I'm Brenda Lionel-Wolke. I'm the Executive Director at Homes Within Reach. And we were approached with this project back probably in 2001. It's changed quite a bit since that original meeting, and so that's where we're at today.
Okay, so bear with me if you've been through some of these slides before. Like staff suggested before, this is a bit of a refresher. Just a really quick overview of both of our organizations, kind of spelling out the vision, mission, and core values. I'll let everyone read through these for Homes Within Reach, which is included within West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust. And since 2002, they have served 14 communities, 195 homes in the portfolio. I imagine that has probably increased by a few since.
We're about 220 right now.
There we go. Assisted over 234 families achieve home ownership at an average AMI of 55.6%, including 14 homes in Bloomington with average AMI of 46.2%. Over at Habitat, again, mission, vision, and values. I'll let folks read through those. It's included in the recording, I'm sure. I guess as a note about our involvement, I think we did a new single-family home in Bloomington a couple years ago, but nothing in the kind of since we've been emerging out of the pandemic. So we're excited to get this project going. We've served about 1,700 families and worked in 66 cities in the 7-county metro area, and that's since 1985. Just kind of some high-level, not real math, but it's math to me. Vacant land in a desirable area, that's 9030, and I think the new address after the lot split would be 9036, but that's subject to county approval. Plus Homes Within Reach, acting as the developer, plus Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, acting as the general contractor in this situation. I should mention, we won't deviate too much from what you might know Habitat to do. We would still use leverage volunteer labor on the sites and as much in-kind and at-cost material support as we can find. And then you add Bloomington HRA support, financial advocacy. I believe there's some newish zoning rules which will apply to this project, which is exciting. And we get an excellent opportunity to create affordable home ownership using a new approach. The next few slides, I think, are just giving a little bit of neighborhood context. I think you all are more familiar with this project or with this location than I am, so it's probably pretty straightforward. And Brenda, feel free to jump in at any point if you'd like to add anything. We're excited about the proximity to kind of all the amenities that home buyers want: shopping, churches, schools, parks, and access to transportation and other amenities. Just a few photos along Park Avenue in the general vicinity. Typically a Rambler, one-story Rambler neighborhood, but there are a few deviations from that. Kind of continuing on the summary, Bloomington HRA-owned lot would be split into 2 lots. As staff mentioned, that process has begun. Each of those lots is going to have 60 feet of frontage on Park Avenue and be front-loaded in terms of car access. So Twin Cities Habitat would construct 2 new single-family houses. Each of those houses would have a detached 2-stall garage, and each of those garages would have an attached accessible dwelling unit. The ADU, the ADUs would match the primary residences in terms of the overall kind of exterior appearance, siding, roof style, etc. And then, like I mentioned, they'd be attached to the garages. And then in addition to the 2 stalls within the garage, there would be an additional parking spot kind of specifically geared for folks living in the ADU. Covered that next bullet point, mentioned the front loading, no alley access, and then there would be an existing mature tree that I think is on this, just on the southern lot, which we would preserve. I know it's a little bit hard to read. I also went old school and printed off some paper copies of the site plan if anybody would like to view that. Same with full house plans. I think it's pretty straightforward. We do 2 separate house models. I believe they can both be up to 4 bedrooms in the houses, and then each ADU would be 1 bedroom. The model that's shown on the left there is typically a 3-bedroom, but if we're not concerned about water tables and that sort of thing, then we often add a 4th bedroom in the basement. So this is one of the house models, 2-story gable roof with a bump out in the front to give it a little bit of depth. I'll go through all the house details later. You can kind of see the floor plans of the house in the upper right corner, and then the floor plan of the accessible dwelling unit in the center lower part of the screen. So the ADU basically has a bedroom with a closet, a bathroom, full bathroom, utility room, and then the remaining large room is kind of a combined kitchen, living room space. Second residence is a little bit more of a 1.5-story look from the street. It is considered kind of by code to be a 2-story. Again, very similar ADU floor plan. I'm trying to think if there's any. I think we'll just get to the construction standards, which will be helpful. So all of our houses are Energy Star certified. In addition to that, these are going to be solar array ready, just meaning that we get sign off from roof truss engineers that if somebody wants to add solar panels, that roof is going to carry that load. Plus we include infrastructure running from the roof down to the utility room to make sure that if somebody wanted to add solar panels in the future, they don't have to make new penetrations for wiring. And then there's a dedicated spot in the utility room for an inverter or any other hardware for the solar panels. Although even that is now changing, where they need less and less kind of intrusion into the house itself. They can do most of that wiring outside. We get our houses Indoor Air Plus certified. We use low flow plumbing fixtures, and we consistently perform better than industry standard on blower door tests and HERS scores. We utilize high efficiency appliances, including HRV in all of our houses. We're still, I think, determining exactly what the utility kind of layout is going to be for each ADU. You obviously, don't need as large of a furnace or possibly a furnace at all. We've been working a lot with air source heat pumps to heat with a backup fuel source. So we'd finalize that as well. All of our kitchen appliances and everything are Whirlpool brand. We use resilient and high quality interior and exterior finishes. On the outside, we use Smart Side. It's typically pre-painted so that the only painting that has to happen after install is just touch-up painting over nail holes and that sort of thing. Makes it pretty good that the pre-painted stuff is like baked on and weathers very nicely, weathers very slowly, which is good. We use a luxury vinyl tile flooring product, or LVT, that looks a lot better than some of the older laminate products, but it's a lot more durable as well. All of our windows are Anderson windows, Series 100, and then we use GAF shingles and underlayment and all that good stuff for the roof system. And then all of our houses are equipped with active radon mitigation systems and sump pumps and drain tile systems. Now we get to the real fine print, and again, I can go over these numbers with anybody who has worse vision than me, or even the same vision as I do. So essentially, the total construction costs on each of these is going to hover, I want to say, around 450-ish thousand. Am I reading? I'm not even seeing it. Yeah, 455, 453. So that includes, that assumes a land write-down by the city, so selling the lots to Homes Within Reach for $1 a piece. Let's see some other high-level items. Soil tests and surveys. We're kind of assuming that we could utilize the surveys that the city has been working off of for that lot split to drive down the costs of the permit surveys. And then I think we've discussed the city taking care of soil testing, whether or not that was going to be in the form of hiring the firm, the testing from yourselves, or reimbursing for that cost. I don't know where we landed on that actually, but so we could talk about that update as well. Total soft costs right around the $30,000 mark. Total development cost right around almost $490 for each project. And then at the bottom we have development gap sources. City of Bloomington, we're assuming funding support from the city. And then I just included an additional line item there in case there were soil corrections, with the assumption that Brenda and I are going to be working off is that these would be considered pad ready, which that term gets thrown around a lot, but essentially it means that if there are costly soil corrections that need to be dealt with, that the city would provide that support as well. And then affordability gap financing, we're assuming, family of 5, right at around 60% AMI for these houses. First mortgage would be looking somewhere in the low 200s. City of Bloomington funding, kind of the remainder left over from the development gap, would help with the affordability gap. And then Homes Within Reach has also secured, I believe, an MHFA grant to support with that. Did you want to mention anything else about the pro forma?
No, I think we've covered all. The 130 for each unit was originally secured in the 2022 allocation from Minnesota Housing. And in that application, we did request funding for one single-family home or a twin home. And that was where we came up with that $260,000. At that time, the city had supported the application at a level of $150,000 for that one unit. As we moved forward and we found out that the lot could potentially be split and that the zoning was potentially going to change to allow ADUs in the city, we were asked to hold off. So we did go back to Minnesota Housing and ask for the approval to move forward with 2 single-family homes with ADUs, essentially going from either 1 or 2 units to the ability to have 4 units. And we were awarded the ability to make that change. No additional money was awarded, though, so we're still at the 260.
All right, so that wraps up the project presentation. Do you have any questions for us, Chair and Commissioners?
Questions? Commissioner Moore.
I feel like I've been talking a lot tonight. I guess I'm wondering about the ADU piece, about where the direction came for that, especially, and first of all, thank you for being here. And I love the work that you do. There's an Habitat for Humanity house 3 homes down from me, and it's fantastic to see. a family living in there instead of a dilapidated house that no one wants to look at. So thank you for the work you do, providing families the opportunity to create generational wealth and stability within their family. So thank you so much. But my question is around the ADUs. Considering the cost that the additional cost that it adds, especially in today's interest rates, what's the benefit of having an ADU now versus allowing the owners the option to do that in the future if their needs demand it, so that the initial cost can be less?
The ADUs were added at the request of staff at that time. Since it was a new zoning allowance, they had come to us and asked if we would be the first to attempt this type of a project. And we do have people that come to us where it's a multi-generational family, but they do want the parents in their own unit. We don't have a lot of duplexes, so this was an opportunity to bring that in. One of the, so the goal is on this first sale that it would potentially be to either a family that would use that for an additional family member, could be parents that need to be close by, or potentially a child with some developmental issues but needs or wants to be independent, to allow that independent. But that the ground lease attached to these units would also state that in the event that there was a change in that family structure, that unit could be used as a rental, which would provide them income, but we would require that it would remain as an affordable rental unit, that they would only be able to rent to someone at 80% AMI at the affordable rents set by HUD.
Commissioner Mueller.
I like the idea of the ADU. I'm supportive of that, but my only question / concern is accessibility when you're looking at like parents needing to live at this place above the garage. It's not very accessible, and just wondering if other ideas have been tossed around as how to make the ADU perhaps more accessible.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. That is exactly the question that we all had, and so we opted to do it's adjacent to attached via shared wall with the garage as opposed to above.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's
I
okay.
totally
No,
missed that.
I think most people assume when they hear ADU, it's kind of like above the garage kind of carriage house look. So yeah, this is.
You can see it's alongside and it's tucked behind the house, so that from the street, it still looks like a single-family home with a detached garage, so that we could keep it looking like the neighborhood.
And I guess I can add to that too, if I may. The ADU will build that so that it's a no-step entry, and then the goal would also be, I think the lots are pretty flat, so I think we should be good to go there, but to make sure that at least one entrance on the adjacent or the associated house on each of those lots would would probably have a wheelchair ramp attached to that for kind of visitability between the ADU and the house.
I remember that from when you presented before.
Great.
Sorry.
No, all good.
Are there any other questions? Okay, hearing no other questions, thank you very much for your presentation. We would now open this up for public comment or as a public hearing. So as of right now, this is a open public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? Is there anyone via WebEx or on the phone wanting to speak on this item? Okay. I will ask one more time if there is anyone in the chambers tonight who would like to speak on item 5.2. With no one coming forward, I'd be looking for a motion to close the public hearing. We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Doblinger to close the public hearing for the private development with West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust for sale and redevelopment of 9030 Park Avenue South. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to close the public hearing passes 6-0. Moving on, we do have an additional motion for this item, and that is to approve the resolution approving contract for private development with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity regarding property located at 9030 Park Avenue South.
Madam Chair, I move.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten, and I'm actually going to second this. So a second by Chair Hukim. Is there any discussion? I have one comment to make, and that is, as I will say, and I have said time and time again, I actually view this property from my house. So I'm very excited for this to be moving forward, and I thank you for your time and dedication and the long haul of this. So thank you for that. With that, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we are on to our discussion items, which is 6.1 HRA Board Policy and Issues Update.
Hi. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I wanted to take this opportunity just to provide a very high-level update on the waiting list opening, with the intention that staff would come back with a more formal report later this year. But as a reminder, our housing choice voucher waiting list, both the voucher waiting list and the project-based voucher waiting lists, opened on July 15th. As of today or this evening, we have received 2,800 applications for the waiting list. Wow. And so I just wanted to provide that update for you. Staff has been really going above and beyond. With the last 2 weeks, we've had a number of households come in and participate in our application workshops that we've been providing from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. every day during regular business hours, and just to get assistance with their applications and things like that. So,
wonderful. I know there is one other update, and that is that we have the interview process for the administrator is going on and is currently happening. So there is a note that they're due to August only having one official board meeting due to election procedures. There may need to be a special meeting to appoint the administrator if one is chosen. So I just wanted to give the board kind of the heads up that could be a possibility for August, just because we do only have one, and if we do appoint someone, or if someone is chosen and to appoint them, we need to do that to get them in here sooner rather than later. So I just wanted to kind of, and if you have any additions to that, feel free. But
and I would just add, thank you, Chair. More communication would occur if we were to reach that stage. I think just wanted to give you a little bit of notice and in anticipation that may occur in the coming weeks.
It's not official, but it could happen. So with that, is there any other updates or issues or anything? Okay. Hearing none, we will be looking to adjourn the Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024 HRA meeting. We'll be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Isay to adjourn the Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024 HRA meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.